The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty road leading into Ruby City, Nevada, and Josephine Keller felt like she might collapse right there in the middle of nowhere. Her younger brother's fevered body growing heavier in her arms with each stumbling step she took. She had been walking for 3 days since their wagon broke an axle 20 miles back, her throat parched, her lips cracked, and her hope dwindling with every moment that passed. The year was 1878, and death came easy in the desert, especially to those foolish enough to think they could cross it alone. But Josephine had no choice. Their parents had died of cholera 6 months earlier in San Francisco, and she and her 14-year-old brother Thomas were heading to their aunt's ranch near Ruby City, which was supposed to be their salvation, their new beginning, their chance at life after loss. Now, as Thomas burned with fever in her exhausted arms, Josephine wondered if they would ever make it. She had used the last of their water that morning, poured it over Thomas's cracked lips while he mumbled incoherently about their mother. The mining town of Ruby City shimmered in the distance like a mirage. So close, yet impossibly far for someone whose legs felt like they might give out at any moment. Josephine was 21 years old enough to know when things looked desperate, and this situation had crossed that line sometime around noon. She stopped walking and sank to her knees in the red dirt, still clutching Thomas, her dark hair stuck to her forehead with sweat beneath her tattered bonnet. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely more than a croak. "God, if you are listening, I need a sign, I need help. I cannot do this alone anymore. Please, just show me that we are not forgotten out here." Tears tracked through the dust on her cheeks as she held her brother tighter. Anything, any sign that someone is coming, that there is hope left in this God-forsaken place. The words had barely left her lips when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from behind, steady and rhythmic against the hard, packed earth. Josephine's heart lurched with a mixture of hope and fear. Out here, a stranger could be salvation or doom, and there was no way to know which until it was too late to run. She turned her head, squinting against the harsh afternoon sun, and saw a lone rider approaching on a buckskin horse, dust rising in a cloud behind him. The man reined in his horse a few yards away, and Josephine got her first clear look at him. He was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, with a weathered brown hat pulled low over his eyes. As he dismounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent his entire life on horseback, she could see he was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and sharp features that spoke of both strength and kindness. His hazel eyes widened with concern as he took in the sight of her, and Thomas collapsed in the dirt. "Madam," he said, his voice low and urgent as he approached quickly, his spurs jingling with each step. "Are you hurt? What happened?" He dropped to one knee beside her, already pulling a canteen from his belt. Josephine tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. The cowboy, because that's clearly what he was, from his worn leather chaps to the rope coiled on his saddle, uncapped the canteen and held it to her lips. "Slow sips," he instructed gently. "Not too fast or you will be sick." The water was the most beautiful thing Josephine had ever tasted. After a few sips, she found her voice. "My brother," she managed, her fingers tightening on Thomas. "He needs help, fever, we have been walking for days." "Our wagon." "I understand," the cowboy said, his tone calm and reassuring. "Let me see him." He gently took Thomas from her arms, and Josephine was too exhausted to protest. The man laid Thomas carefully on the ground and felt his forehead, then checked his pulse at his neck. "He is burning up, but his heartbeat is strong. That is good." He looked up at Josephine with those remarkable hazel eyes. "I am Harrison Reid. I work at the Double R Ranch about 5 miles north of Ruby City. We need to get you both into town to see Doc Morrison immediately." "I am Josephine Keller," she replied, her voice still hoarse despite the water. "And this is Thomas. We are trying to reach our aunt's place, the widow Keller's ranch." Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "Martha Keller is your aunt. I know her, good woman, runs a tight operation. She has been worried sick. Word reached town about a week ago that you two were coming, but when you did not arrive, folks started to wonder." He stood and moved toward his horse. "Can you stand, Miss Keller?" Josephine tried, but her legs buckled. Harrison caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and steady around her. For a moment, they were face to face, close enough that she could see the concern in his eyes, the sun-weathered lines at their corners that spoke of endless hours outdoors. There was something solid about him, something that made her feel safe for the first time in days. "I have got you," he said softly. "Do not worry. I am going to get you both to safety." He lifted Thomas onto his horse first, settling the boy across the saddle, then turned back to Josephine. "I am going to lift you up behind him. You will need to hold on to both Thomas and the saddle horn. It is not far, and Buck here is steady." "Can you manage that?" Josephine nodded, too grateful to be embarrassed by her weakness. Harrison lifted her as though she weighed nothing, settling her behind Thomas on the horse. The animal shifted slightly beneath the extra weight, but remained calm. Harrison gathered the reins and began leading the horse toward Ruby City, walking alongside them. "You should ride," Josephine protested weakly. "We are too heavy for you to walk." "Buck is carrying 2 people and my gear," Harrison replied without looking back. "He does not need my weight too. Besides, it is not far and I have walked further than this before breakfast." There was a slight humor in his tone that made Josephine relax just a fraction. "Tell me about what happened to your wagon." As they made their slow progress toward town, Josephine found herself talking, the words spilling out easier than she expected. She told him about losing their parents, about the long journey from San Francisco, about how the axle broke, and the horses ran off, spooked by a rattlesnake. She told him about the 3 days of walking, rationing their water until it ran out, about watching Thomas grow sicker and feeling so utterly helpless and alone. Harrison listened without interrupting, occasionally offering her more water from his canteen. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. "You did remarkably well, Miss Keller. Most people would not have made it as far as you did. Your brother is lucky to have such a determined sister." "I am not sure determination matters much if we both die out here," Josephine said bitterly. "But you did not die," Harrison pointed out. "And you prayed for help and I came along. Maybe that means something." Josephine remembered her desperate prayer, spoken just moments before Harrison appeared. "Here I am," she thought, remembering the exact words she had used. She had asked God for a sign, for someone to come, and then this cowboy had appeared as though summoned. The thought sent a shiver through her despite the heat. Ruby City began to take shape as they drew closer. It was larger than Josephine had expected, a proper mining town with several streets of buildings, most constructed of wood with a few brick structures interspersed. She could see a hotel, multiple saloons, a general store, and what looked like a church steeple rising above the other buildings. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, and the sounds of civilization reached her ears, voices calling out, a piano playing somewhere, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Harrison led them straight down the main street, ignoring the curious looks from passers-by. He stopped in front of a neat white building with a painted sign that read, "Dr. Morrison, Physician and Surgeon." Harrison tied Buck to the hitching post and carefully lifted Thomas down, then helped Josephine dismount. Her legs were unsteady, but Harrison kept a supportive hand on her elbow. "Samuel," Harrison called out as he pushed through the door, carrying Thomas. "Samuel, I need you." A middle-aged man with graying hair and spectacles appeared from a back room, wiping his hands on a clean towel. "Harrison, what have you got there?" Then he saw Josephine and immediately shifted into a professional demeanor. "Bring the boy into the examination room quickly now." The next hour passed in a blur for Josephine. Dr. Morrison examined Thomas while Harrison helped Josephine into a chair and brought her water and some bread from somewhere. The doctor asked her questions about Thomas's symptoms while Harrison quietly excused himself. When Josephine looked up in confusion, the doctor smiled kindly. "Do not worry, Miss Keller. Harrison is just going to fetch your aunt. She will want to know you have arrived safely, even if the circumstances are not ideal. Doctor." Morrison diagnosed Thomas with a combination of heat exhaustion and a mild infection, likely from drinking bad water somewhere along their journey. "Nothing that rest, proper fluids, and some medicine will not cure," the doctor assured Josephine. "The boy will be fine, though he will need to stay in bed for at least a week." Josephine felt tears of relief sliding down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." "Do not thank me yet," Dr. Morrison said with a wry smile. "Wait until you see my bill." But his eyes were kind, and Josephine knew he was joking. "In the meantime, let me look at you. You are nearly as dehydrated as your brother, and those are some nasty blisters on your feet." Josephine had not even noticed the pain in her feet until the doctor mentioned it. As he helped her remove her worn boots, she saw that her stockings were stained with blood, the blisters burst and raw. The doctor clicked his tongue sympathetically and began cleaning the wounds. The door burst open, and a woman in her mid-40s rushed in, her face flushed with emotion. "Josephine. Oh, my dear child." Martha Keller looked exactly like Josephine remembered from years ago when they had last seen each other, perhaps a bit grayer and more weathered, but with the same warm brown eyes and determined chin. She crossed the room and pulled Josephine into a fierce embrace. "Thank God you are alive. When Harrison came to tell me you were here, that you had been walking for days." Her voice broke. Harrison had followed Martha into the doctor's office, standing quietly near the door, his hat in his hands. Josephine caught his eye over her aunt's shoulder and mouthed, "Thank you." He gave her a small nod and a smile that made something warm flutter in her chest, despite her exhaustion. Martha fussed over both Josephine and Thomas, alternating between scolding them for not sending word sooner about their arrival and expressing her grief over the loss of her brother Josephine's father. "Doctor." Morrison finally shooed everyone except Thomas out of the examination room so the boy could rest. "He needs quiet and sleep," the doctor said firmly. "Martha, you can take Josephine to your place once I have finished bandaging her feet. Thomas will need to stay here tonight so I can monitor him, but he should be well enough to move to your ranch tomorrow if all goes well." Martha nodded and turned to Harrison, who was still standing respectfully near the door. "Harrison Reed, you are an answer to prayer, young man. How can I ever thank you for bringing my niece and nephew to safety?" Harrison's tanned cheeks colored slightly. "No thanks necessary, Mrs. Keller. I was just in the right place at the right time. Anyone would have done the same." "But it was you who did it," Martha said firmly. "You will come to dinner tomorrow night, and I will not take no for an answer. It is the least I can do." Harrison glanced at Josephine, and their eyes met again. There was something in that look, a connection that seemed to pass between them without words. "I would be honored, madam," he said quietly. After Dr. Morrison finished tending to Josephine's feet and pronouncing her dehydrated but otherwise healthy, Martha took her to the ranch in a wagon she had driven into town. The ride took about 40 minutes, and Josephine spent most of it staring out at the Nevada landscape, still trying to process everything that had happened. That morning, she had been certain she and Thomas were going to die. Now, thanks to Harrison Reed appearing exactly when and where they needed him most, they were both going to be fine. Martha's ranch was modest but well-maintained, a sturdy wooden house with a barn and several outbuildings. Corrals held cattle and a few horses, and chickens scratched in the yard. "It is not much," Martha said as she helped Josephine down from the wagon, "but it is home, and now it is your home too for as long as you want it." That first night, Josephine soaked in a hot bath while Martha prepared a simple but delicious meal of beef stew and fresh bread. Clean, fed, and in a soft bed for the first time in weeks, Josephine should have fallen asleep immediately. Instead, she lay awake, thinking about Harrison Reed. She kept seeing those hazel eyes, the gentle way he had held Thomas, the strength in his arms when he caught her. She remembered the warmth in his voice when he said, "I have got you." Most of all, she remembered the timing of his arrival, appearing on that dusty road mere moments after she had finished her desperate prayer. "Maybe that means something," he had said when she mentioned praying for help. Maybe it did. The next morning, Josephine woke early despite her exhaustion. Martha was already up, working in the kitchen. "How are you feeling, dear?" "Better," Josephine admitted. Her feet were sore and her muscles ached, but the desperate fear that had gripped her for days was gone. "I want to go into town to see Thomas." "I figured as much," Martha said with a knowing smile. "The wagon is ready whenever you are. We can have breakfast first, then head in. I also need to stop by the general store for a few supplies." At the doctor's office, they found Thomas awake and looking much better. His fever had broken during the night, and though he was still weak, his eyes were clear. "Josie," he said when he saw her, using his childhood nickname for her, "you look like a real person again instead of a desert ghost." Josephine laughed and hugged him carefully. "You gave me quite a scare, little brother." "I do not remember much after the second day," Thomas admitted. "Just bits and pieces. Did someone really find us, or did I dream that?" "A cowboy named Harrison Reed found us," Josephine said, and she felt her cheeks warm as she said his name. "He brought us here. He saved our lives." Thomas nodded solemnly. "Then I owe him everything. When can I thank him?" "He is coming to dinner tonight," Martha interjected. "You will meet him then, Thomas, assuming Samuel lets you leave this afternoon." Dr. Morrison did indeed release Thomas that afternoon with strict instructions for bed rest and plenty of fluids. Back at the ranch, Martha settled Thomas in a sunny bedroom while Josephine tried to make herself useful despite her aunt's protests. Around 4 o'clock, Martha finally allowed Josephine to help with dinner preparations, and Josephine found herself taking extra care with the meal: a roasted chicken with vegetables, fresh biscuits, and a dried apple pie. "You are fussing quite a bit for a simple thank-you dinner," Martha observed, though her tone was amused rather than critical. "I just want it to be nice," Josephine replied, but she knew her aunt saw right through her. The truth was, she had been thinking about Harrison Reed all day, anticipating seeing him again with a flutter of nerves that had nothing to do with gratitude, and everything to do with the way her heart had skipped when their eyes met. Harrison arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, riding up on his buckskin horse. He had clearly made an effort with his appearance. His face was freshly shaved, his dark hair combed back, and he wore a clean shirt under his vest. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, which he presented to Martha with an endearing awkwardness. "My mother always taught me not to show up empty-handed to dinner," he explained. Martha beamed and invited him inside. Harrison greeted Josephine with a warm smile and a soft, "Miss Keller, you are looking much improved," that made her acutely aware of the clean blue dress she had borrowed from her aunt's wardrobe, chosen because it brought out her eyes. Thomas, propped up on the sofa in the main room, called out to Harrison, "Sir, I am told I owe you my life. That is not a debt I can ever fully repay, but I want you to know I am deeply grateful." Harrison crossed the room and shook Thomas's hand gravely, treating the 14-year-old with the respect of an equal. "I am just glad I came along when I did. You have a very brave sister who got you most of the way there on her own." Dinner was a lively affair. Harrison proved to be an easy conversationalist, with stories about ranch life that had them all laughing. He told them about the time a ornery bull got loose and chased the ranch foreman up a windmill, and about the horse that learned to open gate latches and kept freeing the other animals. He asked thoughtful questions about Josephine and Thomas's life in San Francisco, about their parents, and about their plans now that they were in Nevada. "I am not entirely sure," Josephine admitted. "I suppose we will stay here with Aunt Martha, but I need to find work. I cannot expect her to support both of us indefinitely." "What kind of work did you do in San Francisco?" Harrison asked. "I was a seamstress," Josephine said. "I worked in a dress shop for 3 years. I am quite good with alterations and mending, and I can make a dress from scratch if given a pattern." Martha's eyes lit up. "Josephine, there is not a proper seamstress within 50 miles of Ruby City. The women around here have to order their dresses from catalogs or make do with what they can sew themselves. If you opened a shop in town, you would have more business than you could handle." "I do not have the money to open a shop," Josephine said practically. "I would need to rent space, buy supplies, advertise. The old millinery next to the general store has been empty for months," Harrison said thoughtfully. "Mrs. Peterson, who owned it, moved to Sacramento to live with her daughter. The building is owned by Frank Turner, who runs the livery stable. He has been looking for someone to rent it. And as for supplies, I imagine you could start small and build up as business comes in." "I could loan you the money to get started," Martha offered. "Consider it an investment. You can pay me back once the business is established." Josephine felt overwhelmed by their generosity. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will think about it," Martha encouraged. "Ruby City is growing. The mines are producing well, which means money is flowing, which means people want nice things. You would be providing a valuable service." After dinner, Harrison helped clear the table despite Martha's protests, and Josephine found herself working alongside him in the kitchen. Their hands brushed as they both reached for the same plate, and Josephine felt that strange flutter in her chest again. "I meant what I said yesterday," Harrison said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that Martha and Thomas would not hear from the other room. "You did remarkably well getting yourself and Thomas as far as you did. I have seen grown men give up under less strain." "I did not feel brave," Josephine admitted. "I felt terrified, and when I prayed for help, I did not really expect anyone to answer. I thought we were going to die out there." Harrison was quiet for a moment, drying a plate with careful attention. "My father used to say that God works through people, that when we ask for help, the answer does not always come as a lightning bolt from heaven, but as a person showing up at the right moment to do what needs doing." He glanced at her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "I have been riding that stretch of road every day for a week, checking for any sign of you and your brother. Everyone in town knew Martha was expecting family, and when you did not arrive on schedule, folks got concerned. Yesterday morning, something told me to check one more time, even though I had work waiting at the ranch. My foreman actually got irritated with me for insisting, but I just had this feeling that I needed to ride out one more time." Josephine stared at him, her heart pounding. "You were looking for us, specifically for us." "The whole town was worried," Harrison said. Martha is well liked around here, and when she is concerned, people pay attention. Several men have been riding different routes, checking for signs of trouble. He set down the plate and turned to face her fully. But yes, I was looking for you, and I am glad I found you when I did. There was something in the way he said it, in the intensity of his gaze, that made Josephine's breath catch. This was more than simple kindness from a good Samaritan. This felt like something deeper, something neither of them quite knew how to name yet. Martha bustled into the kitchen, breaking the moment. "Harrison, it is getting late, and you have a long ride back to the ranch. Why do not you stay in the spare room tonight? We have plenty of space, and it would be safer than riding in the dark." Harrison looked uncertain. "I would not want to impose." "You saved my niece and nephew's lives," Martha said firmly. "You can certainly use my guest room for a night, I insist." So Harrison stayed, and Josephine lay awake in her own room, acutely aware that he was sleeping just down the hall. She kept replaying their conversation in the kitchen, the way he had looked at her, the story about how he had been searching for them. He had been searching for her, she realized. Maybe not her specifically, not at first, but the moment they met on that dusty road, something had shifted. She had felt it, and she suspected he had too. The next morning, Harrison joined them for breakfast before heading back to the Double R Ranch. "I have the next few days off," he mentioned as he prepared to leave. "If you are serious about looking at that shop space, Miss Keller, I would be happy to escort you into town tomorrow to meet with Mr. Turner." "That would be very kind," Josephine said, trying to sound casual despite the way her pulse quickened at the prospect of spending more time with him. Harrison tipped his hat to all of them and rode off, but not before catching Josephine's eye one last time with a smile that stayed with her long after he disappeared down the road. Over the next several weeks, a pattern developed. Harrison would ride over to Martha's ranch every few days, ostensibly to check on Thomas's recovery, or to update them on town news, but his visits always seemed to coincide with times when he could spend a few minutes talking with Josephine. He did indeed escort her into town to meet with Frank Turner, who was more than happy to rent the former millinery space to her at a reasonable rate. He helped her clean out the shop, spending an entire Saturday hauling out old inventory and broken furniture. He introduced her to merchants in town who could supply fabric and notions, and he even commissioned her first paid work mending 3 shirts that he claimed had tears, though Josephine privately suspected he had created the damage just to give her business. Josephine found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that went far beyond mere friendship. She learned that Harrison was 25 years old, that he had grown up in Colorado but came to Nevada 5 years ago seeking work. He was the eldest of 4 children, and he sent money home to his family every month. He loved horses with a passion that made him light up when he talked about them, and he had dreams of one day owning his own ranch, though he admitted that was still years away. She learned that he was thoughtful and kind, that he treated everyone with respect regardless of their station, that he had a dry sense of humor that could make her laugh when she least expected it. She learned that he was patient and gentle, teaching Thomas how to throw a rope and never losing his temper when the boy struggled. She learned that he was strong but careful with that strength, never using it to intimidate or dominate. What she did not learn was whether the feelings growing in her heart were reciprocated, because Harrison, for all his friendliness, never crossed the line into anything that could be called courting. He was always proper, always respectful, always maintaining just enough distance to leave Josephine wondering if she was imagining the warmth in his eyes, or the way he always seemed to find excuses to be near her. Martha, watching all this with the knowing eye of a woman who had been young once herself, finally took matters into her own hands. 6 weeks after Josephine's arrival in Ruby City, Martha invited Harrison to dinner again, and after the meal, she conveniently remembered urgent business in town that required both her and Thomas's presence, leaving Harrison and Josephine alone on the front porch as the sun set over the Nevada desert. "Your aunt is not subtle," Harrison observed with amusement after Martha's wagon had disappeared down the road. Josephine laughed. "No, she is not. I think she got tired of watching us tiptoe around each other." Harrison turned to look at her, and there was something different in his expression now, something more open. "Have we been tiptoeing?" "I think you know we have," Josephine said softly. "At least I have been. I was not sure if you felt the same way, and I did not want to presume or make things awkward." "Josephine," Harrison said, and it was the first time he had used her first name without the formal Miss Keller attached. "I have been trying to court you for 6 weeks without actually courting you because I was not sure if it was too soon, or if you might still be grieving your parents, or if I was reading everything wrong." He took a step closer. "But if your aunt is going to leave us alone on purpose, then I figure I should be honest about my intentions." Josephine's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "What are your intentions, Harrison Reed?" "To court you properly, if you will have me," Harrison said. "From the moment I saw you on that road, holding your brother, so fierce and determined and brave, something in me recognized something in you. I know that probably sounds foolish, but it is the truth. And every moment I have spent with you since then has only made me more certain that you are someone extraordinary, someone I want to know better, someone I could very easily fall in love with if I have not already started." Josephine felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I asked God for a sign," she said. "I was kneeling in the dirt, absolutely certain we were going to die, and I prayed for help. And then you appeared, Harrison. You literally rode up and said, 'Here I am.' How could I not see that as an answer? How could I not feel like maybe you were meant to find me?" Harrison closed the remaining distance between them, reaching out to gently take her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip careful. "I do not claim to understand how these things work, but I know that I have never believed in fate or destiny until I met you. Now I think maybe some things are meant to be." "So do I," Josephine whispered. Harrison lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then may I court you, Josephine Keller? May I take you on walks and buy you dinner and try to prove that I am worthy of someone as remarkable as you?" "You saved my life," Josephine said. "You have already proven yourself. But yes, Harrison Reed, you may court me. I would like that very much." He smiled then, a full genuine smile that transformed his whole face, and Josephine thought she had never seen anything more beautiful. They stood there on the porch, hands linked, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, and Josephine felt a peace settle over her that she had not felt since before her parents died. This was right. This was where she was supposed to be, with this man who had appeared at her moment of greatest need like an answer to prayer. The courtship that followed was sweet and slow, a gradual deepening of connection that felt as natural as breathing. Harrison was attentive without being overbearing, romantic without being foolish. He brought her flowers he picked himself from the desert hills. He took her on picnics by the creek that ran through Martha's property. He escorted her to church socials and town dances, and he held her hand during wagon rides while Martha and Thomas pretended not to notice. Josephine's seamstress shop opened in late September, and she was immediately swamped with business just as Martha had predicted. Women came from all over the area to have dresses made or altered, and Josephine found satisfaction in the work, in building something of her own. Harrison was her most faithful supporter, bragging about her skills to anyone who would listen and helping her hang a painted sign above her shop door. Thomas recovered fully and started attending the local school, making friends and gradually adjusting to his new life. He and Harrison developed a close bond, with Harrison serving as something of a mentor and older brother figure. On weekends, Harrison taught him to ride properly and to handle livestock, skills that would be essential for life on a ranch. 3 months into their courtship, on a cool November evening, Harrison took Josephine for a walk away from the ranch house. They climbed a small hill overlooking the valley, where the lights of Ruby City twinkled in the distance and the stars spread overhead in a brilliant canopy. "I have been saving money for 5 years," Harrison said without preamble. "Every spare dollar goes into an account at the bank in town. I have been working toward buying my own land, starting my own ranch." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "But recently, my priorities have changed. I still want those things, but now I want them with you. I want to build a life with you, Josephine. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to work hard during the day knowing I get to come home to you at night." Josephine's breath caught as Harrison released one of her hands to reach into his pocket. He pulled out a simple gold band, unadorned but beautiful in its plainness. "It was my grandmother's," Harrison said. "My mother sent it to me last month after I wrote to tell her about you. It is not fancy, but it is real gold, and it has been worn by a woman who had 52 happy years of marriage. My mother said she could not think of a better next owner than the woman I described in my letter." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hand, looking up at her with those hazel eyes that had captivated her from the beginning. "Josephine Keller, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice when you said yes to being courted by a cowboy who does not have much to offer except his heart and his promise to love you faithfully until the day I die?" Josephine was crying now, tears streaming freely down her face. "You have everything to offer, Harrison Reed. You have kindness and strength and honor. You have a good heart and gentle hands. And yes, yes, I will marry you. I will absolutely marry you." Harrison surged to his feet and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed through her tears. When he set her down, he slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and then he kissed her for the first time. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, a kiss that spoke of all the days and years to come, of a future built together from this moment forward. They were married on a bright Saturday in December of 1878 in the small church in Ruby City. Martha wept happy tears throughout the ceremony, and Thomas stood up as Harrison's best man, proud and solemn in his new suit. Most of the town turned out for the celebration that followed, a testament to how quickly Josephine had become part of the community, and how well-liked Harrison was among the people of Ruby City. The newlyweds spent their first night as husband and wife in a room at the Ruby City Hotel, a luxury Harrison had insisted on despite the expense. Lying in Harrison's arms that night, Josephine thought back to that day on the dusty road, to her desperate prayer and Harrison's miraculous appearance. "What are you thinking about?" Harrison murmured, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "About the day we met," Josephine said. "About how I thought my life was ending and instead it was beginning. About how you were exactly what I needed exactly when I needed it." "We were what each other needed," Harrison corrected gently. "I did not know I was searching for you until I found you, but looking back, I think part of me had been looking for a long time. For someone who saw life the way you do, who had your strength and your grace. You saved me as much as I saved you, Josephine." She turned in his arms to look at him. "How did I save you?" "By giving me a reason to want more than just work and sleep and more work," Harrison said. by making me want to build something lasting, something meaningful, by making me believe in answered prayers and second chances. He kissed her forehead softly. You made my life bigger and brighter and better, Mrs. Reed. I like the sound of that, Josephine said. Mrs. Reed. So do I, Harrison agreed. So do I. They lived in a small cabin on Martha's property for the first year of their marriage, saving every penny they could, while Harrison continued working at the Double R Ranch, and Josephine ran her seamstress shop. It was not easy. There were months when money was tight and weeks when they were both too exhausted to do more than collapse into bed, but they were happy. They were building towards something together, and that shared purpose strengthened their bond even more. In the spring of 1879, Josephine discovered she was pregnant. Harrison was overjoyed, immediately becoming even more protective and attentive than usual. He insisted she cut back her hours at the shop, and he started working extra jobs to build up their savings faster. By summer, they had enough money to make a down payment on a small piece of land about 3 miles from Martha's ranch, just 40 acres. But it was theirs, with a creek running through it and good grazing land. Harrison worked like a man possessed, building them a modest house with help from Thomas and several friends from town. It was simple, just 3 rooms to start, but it was solid and well made, with real glass windows and a good fireplace. They moved in just before the first snow fell, and Josephine cried as Harrison carried her over the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reed," he said, setting her down gently in consideration of her rounded belly. "Welcome home to you too, Mr. Reed," Josephine replied, looking around at the space that was entirely theirs. "We did it. We actually did it." "We are just getting started," Harrison said, pulling her close. "This is just the beginning of everything we are going to build together." Their son was born in February of 1880, during a snowstorm that kept Dr. Morrison trapped at their house for 2 days. Harrison paced the main room like a caged animal while Martha and the doctor attended Josephine, and when he finally heard the baby's cry, he practically burst into the bedroom. "You have a son," Dr. Morrison announced with a tired smile. "Mother and baby are both healthy." Harrison approached the bed reverently, looking down at Josephine cradling their newborn son. The baby had dark hair like his mother and what looked like it might be his father's features. "He is perfect," Harrison whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you, Josephine. Thank you for giving me this gift." They named him Henry, after Harrison's father, with a middle name of Thomas in honor of Josephine's brother. Henry Reed was a healthy, happy baby who seemed content to sleep through most of the day and night, much to his exhausted parents' relief. The years that followed were full of hard work and simple joys. Harrison gradually built up their herd of cattle, starting with just 10 head and slowly expanding as they could afford it. Josephine continued her seamstress work from home, fitting it around caring for Henry and helping with the ranch. Thomas, now 16, came to live with them and work as a ranch hand, effectively becoming their first employee. Martha was a constant presence, doting on her great-nephew and helping out whenever needed. In 1882, Josephine gave birth to a daughter they named Hope, because, as Harrison said, she represented all their hopes for the future coming true. Hope was a spirited child from the start, always moving, always exploring, keeping them on their toes. Henry, now 2 years old, took his role as big brother seriously, always watching out for his little sister. The ranch slowly prospered. Harrison was a skilled cattleman with an eye for good livestock, and his reputation for honest dealing brought him steady business. Josephine's seamstress work evolved into a catalog business, with women from all over Nevada ordering her dresses through advertisements she placed in newspapers. Together, they were building something substantial, a legacy they could pass down to their children. Life was not without challenges. There were years when drought struck and they lost cattle. There were times when illness swept through the area and they held their breath praying their children would be spared. There were months when money was so tight that Josephine went back to mending clothes late into the night while Harrison took on extra work wherever he could find it. But through it all, they had each other. On hard days, Harrison would pull Josephine aside, take her hands, and remind her of that day on the dusty road when she prayed and he appeared. "We survived that," he would say. "We can survive anything as long as we are together." And Josephine would remember, and she would find her strength renewed, and they would face whatever challenges came their way as partners. In 1885, they expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper kitchen. In 1887, they bought another 80 acres adjoining their property, doubling their land holdings. By 1890, the Reed Ranch was one of the most successful small operations in the area, known for quality cattle and Harrison's fair treatment of his workers. Thomas, now 26 years old, had become Harrison's partner in the ranch operation. He had grown into a capable, confident man, and the bond between him and Harrison was as strong as any blood relation. He had his own small house on the property and was courting a young woman from town, a schoolteacher named Anne who often came to dinner and whom Josephine had grown to love like a sister. Henry was 10 years old now, already showing signs of becoming as tall as his father, with Harrison's work ethic and Josephine's quick mind. Hope was 8, a whirlwind of energy and curiosity who could ride a horse as well as any of the ranch hands, and who had wrapped her father completely around her little finger. On a warm evening in May of 1890, Josephine stood on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over their land. Harrison came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, the same question he had asked countless times over their years together. "About how far we have come," Josephine said, leaning back against him. "About that girl on the dusty road who thought her life was over. I wonder what she would think if she could see all this." "I think she would be proud," Harrison said. "I think she would see that her courage and determination paid off, that the prayer she whispered in desperation was answered beyond anything she could have imagined." "I asked for a sign," Josephine remembered. "Just help, just hope, just something to let me know we were not alone." "And I rode up and said, 'Here I am,'" Harrison finished, the words that had become something of a private joke between them over the years. "Except, I think you were as much an answer to my prayers as I was to yours. I just did not know I was praying yet." Josephine turned in his arms to face him. At 42, Harrison had more lines on his face and threads of silver in his hair, but his eyes were still the same hazel that had captivated her 12 years ago. At 33, Josephine knew she too bore the marks of time and hard work, but when Harrison looked at her, she still felt like the most beautiful woman in the world. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "The hard years, the struggles, choosing to build a life with someone you barely knew?" "Not for a single moment," Harrison said without hesitation. "You are the best decision I ever made," Josephine raved. "Marrying you, building this life with you, creating this family, these are the things I am most proud of in this world. I would go through every hard day again if it meant ending up right here, right now with you." He kissed her then, sweet and familiar, a kiss that spoke of 12 years of marriage and still not being tired of each other, of love that had weathered storms and grown deeper with time. From inside the house, they heard Hope calling for her mother and Henry laughing at something Thomas said. The sounds of family, of home, of a life well lived. "Come on," Josephine said, taking Harrison's hand. Our children are waiting for us." They walked into the house together, hand in hand, the way they had faced everything for the past 12 years. And in that moment, Josephine sent up a quick prayer of thanks, not for rescue from danger this time, but for the beautiful, ordinary miracle of this life she got to live, for the cowboy who had appeared exactly when she needed him and had stayed by her side through every day since. The years continued to roll forward with their own rhythm. Thomas married Anne in a beautiful summer ceremony in 1891, and they built their own home on the far corner of the Reed Ranch property. Anne discovered she was pregnant by the fall, and the news brought joy to the whole family. Josephine loved having another woman close by, someone she could share the small moments with, and the two women grew close as sisters. In 1892, Thomas and Anne had twin boys, making Harrison and Josephine aunt and uncle to two more rambunctious Reed boys who added even more life and laughter to the ranch. Henry was fascinated with his younger cousins, and Hope declared herself their protector, a role she took very seriously. That same year, Martha had a scare with her heart, and after a long conversation with Dr. Morrison, she decided to sell her ranch and move into a smaller house in town. "I am not as young as I used to be," she admitted to Josephine and Harrison, "and I want to be close to the doctor, just in case." Harrison bought Martha's ranch, combining it with their existing property to create a substantial spread that could support a much larger herd. It was a big risk, the largest loan they had ever taken, but Harrison felt confident they could make it work. Josephine trusted his judgment, and her faith was rewarded. Within 2 years, they had not only paid off the loan but were turning a healthy profit. The expansion meant hiring more help, and by 1894, the Reed Ranch employed 8 full-time workers plus seasonal hands during roundup and branding. Harrison treated all his workers fairly, paying better wages than most ranches and ensuring decent living conditions. As a result, he had loyal workers who stayed year after year, and the ranch developed a reputation as a good place to work. Josephine's catalog business had grown beyond anything she had imagined. She now employed 3 other seamstresses in Ruby City, women she trained and paid well, and together they fulfilled orders from all over Nevada and even some from California and Arizona. The business had become substantial enough that Josephine hired a young man to handle the bookkeeping and correspondence, freeing her to focus on design and quality control. In the spring of 1895, Josephine discovered she was pregnant again. At 38 years old, she was surprised Henry was now 15 and Hope 13, and she had assumed her childbearing years were behind her. Harrison was delighted, though also worried about her age and health. Dr. Morrison assured them both that while there were risks, Josephine was healthy and strong, and he saw no reason to expect complications. Their second daughter was born in December of 1895, just before Christmas. The birth was longer and harder than Josephine's previous labors, and there were a few frightening moments when Dr. Morrison's face grew concerned. But in the end, both mother and baby came through safely. They named her Grace Martha Reed, Grace for the grace of God that had brought them through safely, and Martha for her great aunt who had given them their start. Baby Grace was tiny and perfect, with her father's hazel eyes and a disposition so peaceful, it seemed impossible she was related to the energetic Hope. Henry, now nearly 16, was surprisingly taken with his baby sister, often helping to care for her when he was not working with the cattle. Hope, at 13, declared Grace to be her baby and could often be found singing to her or showing her off to anyone who would look. Watching their older children with their baby sister brought tears to both Harrison and Josephine's eyes more than once. The turn of the century in 1900 found the Reed family in a position of comfortable stability. Henry was 20, a full partner in the ranch operations alongside Harrison and Thomas. He was a natural leader, respected by the ranch hands despite his young age. He was also courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sensible young woman named Sarah who fit seamlessly into the family. Hope was 18, beautiful and spirited, with her mother's talent for design and her father's business sense. She had taken over much of the day-to-day operations of the seamstress business, bringing fresh ideas and expanding into ready-made clothing that could be ordered and shipped quickly. Under her management, the business had grown even more profitable. Grace, at 4 years old, was the darling of the entire ranch, beloved by everyone who met her. She had an old soul, people said, wise beyond her years but still full of childish joy. She loved animals of all kinds and could often be found in the barn, talking to the horses or playing with the barn cats. Harrison was now 42, his hair more silver than brown, his face deeply lined by years of working outdoors. But he was still strong and vital, still capable of a full day's work, and still as devoted to Josephine as the day they married. Josephine, at 43, had aged gracefully, her dark hair touched with gray, her figure fuller than in her youth but still attractive. More importantly, she was happy. The life they had built together had exceeded her wildest dreams. On their 22nd wedding anniversary in December of 1900, Harrison surprised Josephine with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time they had left the ranch for more than a day or two in years, and Martha insisted on staying at the ranch to care for Grace while Henry and Hope managed things with Thomas's help. In San Francisco, they stayed in a proper hotel with indoor plumbing and electric lights, luxuries that seemed almost decadent. Harrison took her to fine restaurants and to the theater, and they walked through the city where Josephine had lived as a young woman, before tragedy and circumstance brought her to Nevada. "It feels like a different life," Josephine said as they walked through Golden Gate Park. "Like that young woman who lived here was someone else entirely." "In some ways she was," Harrison said. "We are all changed by what we experience, by the choices we make, and the people we love." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "But the core of who you are, your strength, your kindness, your determination, those things have always been there. They are what drew me to you from the very beginning." "I was a mess when you met me," Josephine reminded him, "dirty and desperate and afraid." "You were magnificent," Harrison corrected. "And you still are. Every single day I wake up grateful that you prayed for help that day, that God saw fit to send me to you, that you said yes when I asked you to marry me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me," Josephine Reed. They kissed in the middle of the park, not caring who might see, 22 years of love and partnership and shared experience in that kiss. When they finally pulled apart, Josephine was crying. "Happy tears?" Harrison asked, gently wiping her cheeks. "The happiest," Josephine confirmed. "I was just thinking about that girl on the dusty road again. If I could go back and tell her that all the pain and fear would lead to this, to you, to our children, to the life we built, I wonder if she would believe me." "I think she would," Harrison said. "Because even then, scared as you were, you had hope. You had enough faith to pray, enough strength to keep fighting. That girl became the woman you are now, and I am honored to spend my life loving both of them." They returned to the ranch after a week in San Francisco, and life continued its steady forward progress. Henry married Sarah in 1901, and they built a house on yet another parcel of land the family purchased, expanding the Reed holdings even more. Sarah was pregnant by summer, and Josephine found herself preparing to become a grandmother. The baby came in early spring of 1902, a healthy boy they named Harrison Thomas Reid, after his grandfather and great-uncle. Holding her grandson for the first time, Josephine was overwhelmed with emotion. She thought about her own parents, gone now for over 20 years, and wished they could have seen the family she and Harrison had created. Hope married in 1903, choosing a young lawyer from Virginia City who had come to Ruby City to establish a practice. David Williams was intelligent and kind, with progressive ideas about women's rights that meant he fully supported Hope's continued involvement in the family businesses. They settled in a large house in town, and Hope managed the seamstress operation from there while remaining deeply involved in ranch decisions. Through all of this, Grace grew from a sweet child into a thoughtful young woman. By 1910, she was 14 years old, and she had developed a passion for medicine. Dr. Morrison, now in his 70s and thinking about retirement, had taken her under his wing, teaching her what he could and encouraging her ambitions to pursue formal medical training. It was unusual for a woman to aspire to be a doctor, but Harrison and Josephine had raised their daughter to believe she could do anything she set her mind to, and they fully supported her dreams. In the summer of 1910, Harrison and Josephine celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary. They were now 62 and 53 respectively, both showing the marks of age but still active and engaged in ranch life. They had 3 children, 2 grandchildren with a third on the way, and a successful ranch and business empire they had built from nothing but faith and hard work. On the evening of their anniversary, they rode out together to the hill where Harrison had proposed all those years ago. It was harder to make the climb now than it had been in their youth, but they managed it, and the view was still breathtaking. "You remember standing here that night?" Josephine asked, her hand clasped in Harrison's. "You were so nervous you could barely get the words out." "I was terrified you would say no," Harrison admitted with a laugh. "I had this whole speech prepared about why you should marry me, and it all flew out of my head the moment I looked at you." "I would never have said no," Josephine said. "Even then, just 3 months after we met, I knew you were the one. Some part of me recognized you that first day, recognized that you were my answer, my future, my home." Harrison pulled her close, and they stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in those familiar shades of orange and gold. "I have loved you for 32 years, he said softly, "and I will love you for however many more we are given. In this life and whatever comes after, you are mine and I am yours." "Here I am," Josephine said, echoing the words that had become their private touchstone. "I prayed for help, and you rode up and said, 'Here I am,' and you have been here by my side every day since. That is the greatest blessing of my life." They stayed on that hill until the stars came out, holding each other, grateful for every moment they had been given, for every challenge they had overcome together, for the beautiful life they had built from that desperate prayer and miraculous meeting on a dusty road in the Nevada desert all those years ago. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and sorrows. In 1912, Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, surrounded by family. Her funeral was one of the largest Ruby City had ever seen, a testament to how much she was loved and respected in the community. Josephine grieved deeply for the aunt who had taken her in and helped her build a new life, but she was comforted by the fact that Martha had lived long enough to see her great-niece flourish beyond anyone's expectations. Thomas and Anne continued to be integral parts of the ranch operation, and their twin boys grew into capable young men who worked alongside their father and uncle. Henry and Sarah had 3 children by 1915, and they were in the process of taking over more and more of the day-to-day ranch management, as Harrison gradually stepped back. Hope and David had 2 daughters, and Hope had expanded the clothing business to include a store in Virginia City, in addition to the Ruby City location and the catalog operation. The business employed over 20 women now and was recognized throughout the region for quality and fair labor practices. Grace, true to her dreams, left for medical school in San Francisco in 1914. It was difficult for Josephine to watch her youngest child leave home, but she was immensely proud of Grace's determination and intelligence. Grace wrote home every week, and her letters were full of descriptions of her studies and her growing passion for helping people heal. By 1918, Harrison was 70 years old, and while he was still relatively healthy, age was catching up with him. He no longer worked long days on horseback, instead focusing on the business side of the ranch operations and mentoring the younger generation. Josephine, at 61, had finally stepped back from the seamstress business entirely, turning full control over to Hope. She spent her days managing the household, tending her garden, and spoiling her grandchildren. They had been blessed with good health for most of their lives, but in the fall of 1918, Harrison developed a persistent cough that would not go away. Dr. Morrison's replacement, a young doctor named Phillips, diagnosed pneumonia and ordered strict bed rest. Josephine nursed Harrison through it, just as he had cared for her through various illnesses over the years. For a few frightening weeks, it seemed like Harrison might not recover, but eventually the illness broke, and he slowly regained his strength. The brush with mortality sobered them both. They had always known they would not live forever, but this was the first time either of them had been seriously ill. The first time they had to confront the reality that their time together was not infinite. "I am not ready," Harrison admitted to Josephine one night as he recovered, still weak but improving. "I am not ready to leave you. We have so much more living to do." "Then we will do it," Josephine said firmly, taking his hand. "We will do every bit of living we can for as long as we are given. And when the time comes that one of us has to go on alone, we will face that too, because that is what we do. We face things together, even when together means supporting each other through the hard things." Harrison recovered fully, and 1919 brought new joys. Grace graduated from medical school and returned to Ruby City, opening a practice right next to Dr. Phillips. She was the first female doctor many people in the area had ever seen, and while some were skeptical at first, her skill and compassion quickly won people over. Harrison and Josephine were immensely proud of their youngest daughter's achievements. Henry's eldest son, young Harrison, announced his engagement to a sweet girl from town, meaning the family would continue to grow. Hope's daughters were both bright and ambitious, planning to attend college and pursue their own dreams. The Reed family legacy was strong and would clearly continue for generations to come. In December of 1920, Harrison and Josephine celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, and looking around at all the people who existed because of the life they had built together, Josephine felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Harrison and Josephine sat together in front of the fireplace, just the two of them, the way it had all started. 42 years, Harrison mused. Sometimes it feels like we just got married yesterday, and sometimes it feels like I have known you my entire life. Both are true in their own way, Josephine said, leaning her head against his shoulder. We have lived an entire lifetime together, and yet the love I feel for you is still as fresh and new as it was that first day you took my hand on Martha's porch and asked to court me. I wish I could give you 42 more years, Harrison said quietly. I wish we could go back and do it all again, knowing what we know now, appreciating every moment even more. We appreciated it, Josephine assured him. We lived it fully. We built something beautiful, Harrison. Look at our family, look at what we created. 3 amazing children who have gone on to create their own amazing families. A successful ranch that provides livelihoods for dozens of people. A business that employs women and gives them independence. We did that together, and I would not change a single moment of it. Harrison turned to look at her, his hazel eyes still as warm as they had been 42 years ago, though framed now by wrinkles and age. I love you, Josephine Reid. I have loved you from that moment on the dusty road when I first saw your face. I loved you when you were young and scared and desperate. I loved you when you were strong and confident and building your business. I love you now, with your gray hair and your wise eyes and your gentle hands. I will love you until my last breath, and if there is anything after this life, I will find you there too. And I will be waiting, Josephine promised, because you are my answer, Harrison. You were the sign I prayed for, the help I needed, the love I did not know I was searching for. Whatever God has planned for us in this life or the next, I know it includes us being together. Some things are just meant to be. They sat there in the firelight, holding hands as they had done thousands of times before, comfortable in the silence and the presence of each other. Outside, the Nevada night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead, the same stars that had watched over them since that fateful day in 1878 when a desperate prayer brought them together. Josephine thought about that girl on the road, exhausted and afraid, holding her brother and begging God for help. She thought about the cowboy who appeared as if summoned, who said, "Here I am," and changed the entire course of her life. She thought about every day since then, the joys and struggles, the building and growing, the love that had deepened with each passing year. "Thank you," she whispered, though whether she was thanking Harrison or God or the universe that had brought them together, she could not have said. Perhaps she was thanking all of them, grateful for every force and choice and moment that had led to this life, this love, this profound and lasting happiness. Harrison squeezed her hand, and they sat together in peaceful contentment. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. Their story had begun with a prayer and a miraculous appearance, and it had unfolded into a love story for the ages. Proof that sometimes the help we need most comes in forms we never expected and stays with us far longer than we dared to hope. As the fire burned low and the night grew late, they finally rose to go to bed, still holding hands, still together, still grateful for every day they had been given. 42 years of marriage, and still, when Josephine looked at Harrison, she saw her answered prayer. And when Harrison looked at Josephine, he saw the purpose his life had been searching for. Some stories have dramatic endings, grand finales that tie everything together with a flourish. But the best love stories simply continue, day after day, moment by moment. 2 people choosing each other over and over again until the last day they are given. That was the story of Harrison and Josephine Reid, not perfect, not without struggles, but real and deep and lasting. A testament to the power of faith, hope, and love to transform lives and create something beautiful from the most desperate circumstances. They lived out their remaining years in contentment, surrounded by the family they had created and the legacy they had built. When Harrison passed away peacefully in 1927 at the age of 79, he did so holding Josephine's hand, their eyes locked, communicating without words the love that had sustained them for nearly 50 years. His last words were simple but perfect. "Here I am." Josephine lived another 8 years, remaining active in the family business and deeply involved in her grandchildren and great-grandchildren's lives. She never remarried, never even considered it. Harrison had been her one great love, her answered prayer, and she felt no need to try to replace something so perfect and complete. When she passed away in 1935 at the age of 78, she was surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Harrison had created, and her last words echoed his. "Here I am." They were buried side by side on the hill where Harrison had proposed, overlooking the ranch they had built together and the valley they had called home. Their headstone was simple, carved with their names and dates and a single line that told their entire story. She prayed. He came. They built a life of love. The Reed Ranch continued to operate, passed down through the generations, a lasting testament to what 2 people could create when they worked together with love and determination. The seamstress business eventually transformed with the times but remained in the family, still employing women and still committed to quality and fair treatment. Grace's medical practice continued to serve Ruby City for decades, eventually joined by her own daughter who followed in her mother's footsteps. The story of Harrison and Josephine became family legend, passed down through the generations, told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. But those who knew them, who had witnessed their love firsthand, knew that no embellishment was necessary. The truth was remarkable enough: a desperate woman's prayer answered by a cowboy who appeared at exactly the right moment, leading to a lifetime of love and partnership and family and joy. In the end, their story was not about drama or adventure, though it had started with both. It was about something far more profound and lasting: 2 people finding each other, choosing each other, and building a life together one day at a time. It was about faith rewarded, hope fulfilled, and love that lasted long past death, echoing through generations in the form of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried Harrison and Josephine's values forward into the future. It was a story about answered prayers and perfect timing, about cowboys and seamstresses, about Nevada deserts and family ranches, about hard work and determination and grace. But most of all, it was a love story, simple, true, and lasting, the kind that reminds us that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected places, arriving exactly when we need them most, changing everything forever.